Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Alex Wood. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Memo. If you're not familiar with the Memo, we are just 7 weeks old, but we are a new publication, and it's our mission to tell the stories in technology that matter. We cover 4 key areas: innovation, business, policy, and culture. And we also deliver a daily newsletter called the Daily Memo, which you should go up and subscribe to now. It will give you exactly what you need to know about in the world of technology delivered to your email every single day. Now, we have got a fantastic group of panelists with us today, and when I was preparing and thinking about this panel, it really got me thinking about where we are in technology, not just in London, not just in the UK, but also in Europe. Have a look at the headlines over the last week. It's been another miserable week for Europe. We've got talk about Greece. We've got the looming doom of a British referendum on leaving the EU. And I think for many people from the outside of Europe, it looks like we're heading into a bit of a disaster. But then contrast that with some positive news. There was a report from GP Bullhound just this Monday that showed that there are 41 billion valuation plus companies in Europe. That's 41 billion companies, also known as unicorns in the business. But what's really interesting is out of those 40 companies, 30 were launched, 30 achieved that valuation this year. So that really gives you a sense that despite all of the gloom that's been going on in the continent, there's actually been some amazing stuff. If we rewind in time, we go back as far as 2006 when great companies like Huddle, that we're going to hear about today, were launching. Despite the economic climate that they went through, they pulled through and they went from startup all the way to scale up. And now we've got these 40 scale-up companies across Europe, and we're going to have more and more as we see more and more startups making it. So the purpose of our discussion today is very much to kind of understand the challenges around growing these fast-growing businesses and making them achieve expansions to America, new markets, but also how larger organizations can work with other organizations, smaller, to get them to that stage to be those $1 billion unicorn companies. But without further ado, I would love our panelists to give us a more detailed introduction and tell us a bit more about themselves. I'm going to start off with Dennis from Konica Minolta. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello there. So hello, everyone. So from Konica Minolta, my role is really to look after medium to long-term business development for the company. We're a Japanese headquartered company out of Tokyo, multi-billion dollar revenues each year, and a very wide portfolio. So everything from multifunctional devices through to IT services, through to even planetarium businesses. So we have a very, very broad range of our portfolio, and a very broad range in terms of customer sizes. We also have a very strong partnering network that we've been establishing over the last couple of years. One notably is called the Leading Edge Partners, which is about accessing and working with startups from various communities across the world. So my role is to help drive, obviously, future growth for Konica Minolta, but also drive business for also our customers and clients, as well as create new novel offerings to the marketplace.
And Stuart, tell us a bit about Huddle.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody.
We're also joined by Sherry Coutu as well, who I'll introduce in a second. Get yourself comfortable.
So my name is Stuart Cochran. I'm CTO of a company called Huddle. Huddle was founded in 2006, as you just heard. We're started in London, very much one of the early companies in the sort of tech city initiative and community that's now grown up in London so much. We're now co-headquartered in London and San Francisco. And a big part of our story has been about expanding from London to other countries and other markets. Maybe we'll get to that later. But a few words on Huddle. Huddle is a cloud business, a SaaS business. We help our customers to build digital workplaces for them to securely share and collaborate on content and their documents. And what's interesting a bit about Huddle, at least in my opinion, is that our customers range from more than 80% of UK government departments through to some of the largest US federal agencies, through to many private sector firms, including 5 out of the top 8 professional services firms in the world. So we have a very wide range of different customers that all have the same need around finding a way to securely work with their extended supply chain, their partners, their suppliers, government regulators. And our growth has been, based on solving a very important problem, but also, I think, taking advantage of the fact that there's a sort of halo effect between public and private sector.
Thank you. And now we're also joined by Sherry Coutu, who I believe is one of the most prominent faces, not just on the London tech scene, but also across the country. And I know that scale-ups is an issue that is very dear to her heart, and I'm going to let Sherry introduce herself.
Okay. So you can hear me good? Hi. Well, welcome. So scale-ups is something that I have participated in as an entrepreneur and practitioner, and also as an angel investor and LP of a number of venture capital companies. And a few years ago, I started being concerned that although we were really great at starting companies, I was more curious about what we needed to do in order to grow them and keep on growing them and keep on growing them. And so last year we wrote a report about what you needed to do as an entrepreneur and as a government person and as an LAP and as a trade ambassador to make London and the UK the best place, not only to start a company, which it already is, but also to grow a company to unicorn-esque proportions. So we launched an institute, and we hope to work with everybody in the economy so that we can remove every single barrier that there is to growth, and make sure that if, using a sailing analogy, that we pump gusts of wind into each entrepreneur's sails so that they can go as far and as fast as they deserve to.
Thank you. Now, I'm guessing that some of the people in the audience here today, some of you might not be from the UK. We may have some international visitors today. So I thought it might be quite interesting, Stuart, if you could, very much, you've got a first-person experience of this. Tell us what it was like back in 2006. What was the scene like here for you as a startup to then become a scale-up?
It was very different to what it is now, and I think the scene, the community has really matured and developed, and I think it is remarkable just how much access we have in London to not just the tech scene itself, but actually I think it's much more important, it's broader than that. We have access to higher education, we have access to creative interests, we have access to finance, of course. Access to capital is absolutely critical for startup and scale up. So I think there is much more help available. There's obviously much more that we can continue to do. And I think what we have seen is that part of the transition from startup to scale up, and what's happened is that it is really about building in repeatability to your business. So when we were 2006, we were in a pretty rundown building in a pretty rundown part of town. We were figuring out our product market fit. We were trying to see, what are the customers that we could win, and our focus was really, as every startup is, in just getting that recognition and that validation that you are solving an important problem. People will pay you money for that solution, and that you can continue to grow. But as we've scaled, you have to change your emphasis away a little bit from sort of just winning that business. You have to think about retaining customers and managing your sort of microfinances, so really understanding your engine for growth in terms of acquisition cost and lifetime value. And that means you also then have to scale your own business. You have to have more scale, you have to have more people, which is a challenge in itself, and maybe talk about later. But you also have to have more repeatable business processes. You have to know how you are going to sell, how you're going to serve your customers, how you're going to support them. And all those things take time to figure out.
Yeah, give us a sense of the timeline, because you're starting in 2006. Now, 2015, you've raised huge amounts of money. You have incredible government contracts across the world. You have offices across the world. What sort of timescale are we looking at? How did you get to those points, and how long should people look towards scaling up?
Well, I think we've raised about $85 million. We did a Series D round just autumn last year. That was another 50 million as part of that. And it is a huge amount of money. But one of the things I think that is important for that transition from startup to scale up is the size of your ambition needs to continue to push upwards. And especially because we are competing in the sort of global marketplace, and we need to make sure that we are really clear about the amount of money we need to raise so that we can invest in what is important for the business. So it's a large amount of money, but I think you have to aim high, I guess is my point. In terms of the timeline, well, some of the key milestones for us, I guess, were our first step outside of the UK market. And we did that a little bit sort of counterintuitively. I mean, the sort of common wisdom is that if you're selling to government, it's incredibly difficult. It's very long sales cycles. Government is not fast moving. It's not the first to adopt new technology necessarily. But we sort of challenged that, and we actually took investment from the US government, or at least a piece of the US government, and that helped us enormously. So not only did we see, and this was, I guess, about 4.5 years ago.
I imagine that to be very complicated, getting investment from the US government.
It is complicated, yeah. and what is also complicated is what comes with it, because the US government has a cloud-first policy, so it has a very strong advocacy for government agencies to adopt cloud services, but inevitably there's a huge amount of regulation that comes with that. You have to prove to government agencies that you have what it takes to satisfy their needs, and that is an enormous investment. We were the first company in our space just a few months ago to announce that we have achieved what's called FedRAMP certification. FedRAMP is a procurement program that the US government has, and I can't underestimate or understate how much work that was for us. And for a relatively small company, we're still just under 200 people, that it's a major investment, and I think we wouldn't have done that unless we'd had the assistance of the US government and the investment they made in us to really give us the confidence it was going to be worth our while to do that. So there's a very high barrier to entry, but once you overcome that, as we saw with the UK government and the work we do here, it really can help you enormously, because many of our private sector customers will look at us and say, we want to adopt cloud services, we think it's very important, but we are concerned about compliance and risk and regulation and security. And then they look and say, well, you're trusted by governments, therefore that's kind of good enough for us. So it's super important.
Yeah. Now, Sherry, from your perspective, you've seen a lot of amazing companies go through this process. And I think we've heard from Stuart, in Huddle's case, there's clearly been a lot of money involved in that, and they've been incredibly successful at fundraising. Is it really just about cash, or is there more to it?
It's definitely not just about cash. Although there was some, I don't know if you talked about the GB Bullhound unicorn study earlier, so which I think is outstanding analysis like I've never seen in this country ever. So you should all read it if you haven't read it yet. But no, we looked at, so money is important. It's the fourth most important thing that you need to become a unicorn if we're all aspiring unicorns.
So what are our top three then on top?
The top three are people that you can hire who have the skills that you need. And that is either number one or number two. In our study last November, when we surveyed the companies that were scaling, it was the number one issue. There was another research report released yesterday by Cranfield that said it was the number two. But it's number one or number two. And number two is leadership capacity. So you growing your leadership team from the single entrepreneur to a cadre of people who can help you not only get from 100 to, from 0 to 100, but 100 to 500. The people who, I'm sure that you're now worrying about what do you need to do to get to 500. So you'll be looking to hire people who have taken companies from 100 to 500. As you start to look for people who have done that before, certainly in the UK, there are less people who have done that. So sometimes, you need to train, lots of training. You also sometimes need to be able to poach them from other companies, maybe big ones that are already at scale. And sometimes you may need to import them from other domains, in which case it's a lot easier if we could get something like the scale-up visa that we have called for. The third thing is how to go into international markets and procurement. You mentioned government procurement. Big customers and learning how to sell at scale is an issue at the moment. It's the third issue. Fourth is the finance. If you can sort out the first three, and often financiers will know that they can help with the number one, number two, and number three issues, which is what gives them confidence to invest.
Yes.
But money, if it comes, should come with strings that help you sort out ahead and put people in place and help you put people in place to run as fast as you need to.
Brilliant. And Dennis, we were just chatting earlier, and I know that you have had an incredibly eclectic career. Tell me from your perspective as someone who, I believe, worked as the chief technologist at NATO, and you've also had a very senior role at HP. What advice do you have to scale-ups?
So there's a fundamentally difference of how you approach things from a large company to a small one. So from a large company, I think that a lot of people spend their careers in very large organizations where they have the benefit of time and the benefit to ponder over things to make the right decisions. So when they approach or work with startups or growing companies, they often forget that every time somebody comes out to the door or you go and visit a large enterprise or you have someone come in, their operating profit is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So from an enterprise perspective, from an engagement, it's very, very important that large enterprise become aware of the fabric of what a startup is like, working in a startup. And they're very keen to extract the intellectual property of that creativity that often starts at that moment of creation of a company as it gets bigger. But they're less sensitive to the dynamics, certainly the financial dynamics, but the resource dynamics of a company. So I think from a large company perspective, that's one of the key things. You need to help the smaller companies understand strategically what are the gaps or what are your own aspirations, and help them get to a point where there is actual activity and progression going on so that you are supporting your own economy or your wider economy and your company. From a small startup or a small medium-sized company interoperating with or engaging with a large enterprise, I think that on the other side, people often make assumptions. It's the area of thought leadership, creativity, tech. You tend to believe that what you have and what you're presenting is very, very clear picture of its value. And often the mistake is to use that value statement to a large organization as being the major driver for force. And what you really need to do is do your homework and make sure that you understand their broader strategic areas and how you can interconnect into that framework, whether it be partnerships or you're looking for investments or you're looking for access to resources or even client engagements. It's very, very important to do that. I think it's much more important over funding. It's the ability that your relationship and your engagement hits the nail on the head from both sides, so you both see the value and you both execute on something to move forward as quickly as possible. Not as I've seen many, many times, is you have year after year of an engagement that never really goes anywhere, right? And if small companies do that 10, 20 times over, it's really hurting their own momentum and growth in the marketplace. So I think both sides are duty bound to make sure they understand each perspective of value and make sure they connect on that.
Can I come in on that?
Yes, please do.
So one of the things that I think that we as an there you go. Yeah. One of the things that I think we can do as an ecosystem is make sure that when a scale-up or a startup is meeting a large corporate or potential customer, that they're meeting with the right person at the right time. And there's some really fascinating things that we found that were highly effective that did matchmaking. And that's one of the things that I think the government can do. I think it's one of the things that we can all do in the ecosystem better. I'm sure it's probably one of the things that's happening right here today after the networking. But it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to be opening up to questions from the audience shortly, but I thought it'd be good just to move the conversation on to moving into international markets. Now, inevitably, when a startup is becoming a scale-up, they need to start breaking into some new markets. And many people, like in your case with Huddle, have gone across to the US. Tell us a little bit about the story and how that came about and some of the challenges you found when you broke into the US market.
I mean, it really came about in two ways. One, clearly the US market, at least from the outside, is perceived to be a huge market. And actually, that's one of the mistakes I think that startups make, is to treat it as a single market, and it's clearly not. It's an enormous country, and even West Coast to East Coast, there's enormous differences in terms of the sort of approach you need to take and where companies are based. But we also looked at it in terms of access to capital. I mean, I think whilst London is a fantastic place to start up a business and to scale a business, and we can clearly raise money here, and we did with our last round. It came from UK-based investment firms. I think there's also an advantage to being able to be present in the US, and certainly when we were raising earlier rounds, it was important to bring on board investors from the US as well as the existing ones we had from the UK. So there's a kind of two goals for us.
And where did you go in the US first?
We went to the West Coast first, and if you look at our business, then we have moved to the East Coast too, and especially because of our government work. Clearly a lot of the government is around the Washington area, and we try to balance our investment to make sure that we are in the right place, because again, it's a mistake to think that you can just go to San Francisco and then you're in the US. You're not. You're in a large economy. California itself is large, but you have to really think about the vertical markets you're targeting, the organizations that you can be introduced to. That's a super important point. Because again, to pick up on the earlier point, you can't just go knocking on the door. You will spend all of your time and burn all of your money doing that. Yes. And so therefore you've got to be really selective about the sort of the companies that you call upon. And it goes back to the point about building a team and building a business and hiring. I mean, the biggest challenge I think for any startup, and we've certainly seen it, is choosing the right people to take you that next step. And that step, it always changes. So the kind of person you need continues to change. And the one thing I would say about being in London is our ability to attract talent here is so much easier than if we were based in the US. Partly because the UK workforce is fantastic, the talent here is amazing, but also because we can look to Europe as well as looking to the US. And if you look at our management team, we brought in a new CEO earlier this year from Europe who had that experience of scaling, and we looked in the US at the same time, and we chose the right person for us. And I think being able to look in both places was really important for us.
So it's really, really interesting. So you're saying that in the different stages of the business, you need to bring in different leadership teams and different perspectives, I guess, as well.
I mean, it's because you need that experience, but also you are changing an organization, you're changing a business, and you have to retain parts of what made you successful, whether that's the sort of spark of innovation and creativity, whether it's the sort of entrepreneurship of a founder who is going to drive a business, whether it's the technical team that build their expertise and their knowledge and really build amazing software. And of course, to retain that talent whilst changing the business is hard. And you have to think about culture, you have to think about the way in which you incentivize and compensate people, and you need to make sure that I think, again, another mistake we've seen happen is you bring in a big company person.
Yes.
Because you think that they will give you what you need to become a big company yourself. And it's not like that. It's a journey you go on, and you have to choose the person at the right stage of the journey.
I think from my perspective, speaking honestly, it's always journalistically, it's the classic story, the dream. You start up in London and then you're going to end up in California and you're going to raise loads of money. But Sherry, I keep seeing more and more startups going to New York now. And would you agree that, as Stuart was saying, that you shouldn't treat the US as one market, and maybe there are different cities and different approaches for different companies?
The US is a varied market, and New York and Boston as well, actually. If you're health sciences, then Boston is an amazing place with a huge critical mass, which is really important. New York, probably ad tech, maybe fintech. West Coast, a whole lot of things, including hardware. Same as the UK. There are some, if you look up for some of the chemistry companies up in Aberdeen, down to some of the gaming companies in Manchester and Cambridge. So there are pockets of beautiful specialists, and you have to know where they are. So if you're a gaming company, then you should probably go where there's lots of other gaming people. If you're pharmaceutical, you should probably go to Boston or in the Golden Triangle if you're aiming at that in the UK. But it's all about segmenting your market and understanding who your customers are and who you need and where the talent is that you need. You can't just, there's no such thing as a big market. You have to break it down into actionable objects and relationships that you can nourish and grow.
Yeah, and we touched upon it just briefly. Culture as well. How can you make sure that the culture grows with a scale-up? That must be so hard.
Well, I think there's both art and science to it. And one of the things that I see happening in California, and also happening way more here than 25 years ago when I started up my first scale up, is you're always talking, you're always networking, you're learning informally. So if I'm going to have to grow, hire 20 more people, does that mean that I should all start them at the same time and have them go through, a formal induction? How do I think about the curriculum that they need to start? How do I get them up to speed really quickly? How do I make sure if I'm the founder that things that I don't approve of don't start happening? And that means that you have to be there, and I think you have to influence it if you have a particular preference for your culture, and you need to infuse that throughout. And I think the learn and continually learn and focus on what the vision of the mission is really important. I think that mission-driven companies that know what they're doing are much easier to scale because everybody knows what they're trying to do. It's you can go a lot faster when you don't have to continually brief people, and it's very clear. So simplicity and clarity is important. But you've got to set that as the founder and make sure that the people you hire are going to row in the same direction as you. Otherwise, you start going all over the place and you flounder, and that's not helpful.
Yeah. I think it would be a great time to open up some questions from the audience. We've got a fantastic group of panelists here. I'm not sure, do we have microphones here? We do, yes, there's a gentleman with a microphone. Please put your hand up if you have a question for our panel. We've got one here at the front. Thank you.
And there's one in the corner.
Yeah, hello.
As well.
Okay, so it's to the panel. There's a famous saying that, US is the graveyard for UK businesses. So it seems like, well, you guys bucked the trend, especially yourself, Stuart. So I'm just curious to know if that's going to be an ongoing trend, the UK. And how did you get the the US government to invest in you and to get on the federal list? Because that seems, very amazing, I'm just...
Yeah, it was amazing, and I'm not sure I agree with that sort of stereotype. I mean, I think, like you said, I think it's businesses succeed or fail because of many reasons, but mostly is about your ability to execute. I mean, you have to have a great mission, you have to have a great vision, you have to have a great idea, but at some point it becomes about execution, and executing is hard in any business, large or small. It's hard to do that. I'm not just sure that it's necessarily the choice to go to a market is the death knell for a business. I think in terms of what we did, we just leveraged what we knew we were good at. I mean, I think that's something, again, that businesses have to do. And again, in a startup, you're searching for the thing you're good at. You have an idea, but you haven't validated that idea, so you need to validate it, you need to get your first customers, and often that can lead to changes in what you think you are doing and how you might solve that problem. So you have to be learning, you have to listen to what the market tells you. And in our case, the way we got investment was to leverage what we'd done in the UK government, the support we received from government, as well as the solutions we provided to them, and we used that to get the attention of the US government, but they were searching. I mean, they were searching for innovation. I mean, they were looking for a way in which they can accelerate the adoption of innovation into the federal agencies. So it was very much a kind of meeting of minds, I think.
And Sherry, I saw some raised eyebrows when we had the comment about the graveyard. Do you disagree?
I do disagree. I think that, I absolutely disagree. I think that the US is a place where we can take some of our innovations and grow them to beautiful effect because they've got a huge number of customers and they've also got some talent that can help us go far. I don't recognize that phrase, and I definitely, so I don't agree with that at all, and it's not a story that I know.
Could I interrupt as well? So, granted, US have a very vibrant startup economy, and they have very good universities, and they have great thought leadership, right? And they're a world leader. But you need to compare that also to Europe as well. Europe, as a whole, has more patents in Europe each year than the rest of the world put together, significantly more. It has also over the last 2 decades politically changed significantly. So what there is now is a massive access to thought leadership and creativity and new technologies and a very strong connected economy. And then you have some real great hubs like the UK and London that are the central mass. So I disagree that that's the case. I think that you will see significant market, new technologies and developments in Europe over the next decade, which will, I honestly believe this, will outpace the US. Right? I honestly believe that. So I think in recent history it might be the case, but not anymore, I don't think so. The other thing I want to say about companies going to California and that, you have to be very careful in that you are a very, very small fish in a very, very big pond. And not what happens to small fishes in very, very big ponds, right? So you need to select what ponds you're going to be in to enable you to grow the most, right? So the standard idea of we're doing all right here in London, let's go to New York or California as the next obvious step, doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It can be Eastern Europe, it can be Asia Pacific, it can be Latin America. That may be where you find your fortune. So again, I agree with the others. I don't see that as a term really that we should use.
Great, thank you for your great question. I think we had another question in the corner here.
Hi, Dennis, you said that for startups to work with large enterprises, they need to understand their strategic priorities. Yeah. And Sherry, you said that it's all about getting in to see the right person. I work for Innovate Finance, and we work with large enterprises, but also small fintech startups. And some of the feedback we hear is that fintech startups, even if they do both of those things, they struggle to change the corporate mindset in that what's on offer from the corporates is a 6-month trial with no commitment at the end of it, and a lot of them can't afford to put that time and effort in when they could be out prospecting for other business, for example. So how do you think you can change the corporate mindset of how to work with the startup community?
Well, I think of corporates being customers, and one of the things when I've successfully helped sell things to government is helping them serve their customers. So bearing that in mind, I don't know if they need to change or if we need to understand what we need to do in order to satisfy our customers. One of the programs that I was involved, and by the way, I think the organization does a terrific job. So I've been admiring the traction that you've been having. So I think it's more a learning how to position yourself so that they can more easily buy from you. I've often written internal business cases for large corporates because I know that they don't have a grasp on the technicalities of what it is that we've got. So if you understand what process and what committees they need to get something through, then you can write the case for them, and that gets it through faster because they aren't very good at articulating what it is that sometimes a highly innovative company does. So I think of them as a customer, and I try to make it easy for them to partner with me so they can serve their customers better. So I'd seek to understand them more rather than saying, what do they have to do to change? I think that you also have to go down to relationships. There's people there who are very passionate about whatever their mission is and what their job is, but understanding what they need to do to be successful is also helpful for you to be more effective. So if they have to go through certain processes, I just help them go through those processes faster.
For my opinion, I think that smaller companies need to be more ruthless. Right? They need to say no. Right? You need to educate the large companies that it's not good for you to spend 6 months on an open-ended project with very little revenue or operating profit, massive investments and no promises. The world is full of large companies. There's full of people you can engage with that will try and be your champion and sponsor. And if you're talking to somebody and in a period of time the conditions are so awkward for you, you just need to say no. Just walk away, because there are plenty of other opportunities and plenty of other companies. That will change the large enterprise, because they won't be able to access the intellectual property that's available in that sort of behavior. And big companies, once they start on a pattern of behavior, will do it. So I do think that's a little bit as well the problem that needs to be solved from the companies coming forward, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I used to view the pattern recognition of whether or not it's going to go anywhere has to happen very fast.
Yes.
And I used to regard some large corporates as just brain suckers. You know, you knew they were never ever going to do something, but they were kind of curious. And you've got to just don't waste a second of your time with them, and they will fail, and you will get their customers. And so yeah, but just recognize whether or not you're going to be able to do business. Yes, try. No, eat their cake.
I've done it myself. I've had company. I wanted to do something with them. I wouldn't lay the conditions down. I was interested, but not enough. And they went off and they did it with somebody else. They went off and did it with a competitor. And I think to myself, God, I wish I'd have, acted a bit better, So.
I'm afraid we're actually coming up to our last couple of minutes, so I thought it'd be really beneficial just to ask our panelists maybe for a couple of closing words, perhaps highlighting any upcoming reports or other things that you think people should be finding out about scale-ups. Let's start with Sherry.
Well, I think the UK, I'd talk to each other more and use your network to figure out what you need to do to grow faster. I think we're a great ecosystem here. We've got all the resources. And the other thing that I love about our community is that by talking and learning through your networks and other people, you'll get there a lot faster. And go for it and run for it. Don't wait for it to be handed to you. I think it's for you to chase. And the rewards are fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And Stuart?
I mean, I'd very much echo that. And I think I'd just say that the opportunity I see it being part of in London is not just to have that network in the tech scene in London, but as I said earlier, to really reach out beyond that, to look into higher education. I think there's enormous possibilities for working more closely with higher education institutions and also just other industries. I mean, what we do is very much trying to bring together design and creativity and creating fantastic user experiences, as well as all the very heavy lifting, very technology-driven engineering that we have to do. And London, again, is a perfect city in which to work across creative industries and technology ones.
For me, I think if you look at this week, London Technology Week, and this great event here, in a way, it's part of a wider story where London and broader UK are trying to reinvent themselves. And what we have is a bit of a perfect storm coming. We have massive intellectual property available across Europe and our connections with the rest of the world. We have a very strong connected economy here. And I think we have an ever-increasing openness and objectiveness how to engage with all sides of businesses and make it a win-win for both parties. So I think that my personal view is very, very positive, and I think that if you're a small company, it's the best time to be a small company. I just think you need to be very objective in your engagements with larger corporations, and you need to be ruthless and say no when things are not working for you.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderfully positive point to end on. I think we've talked a number of times about the report from GP Bullhound. I thoroughly recommend it, and I think you do as well, Sherry. And do you have another scale-up report coming up in the future as well?
We'll be reporting in November on how we're doing, and the Institute, the Scale Up Institute, will launch in September. So we hope to have a really big, buzzy program that will help small companies become big companies rather than stay small, because that's what we think everybody wants to do, or that's what, well, we're going to cater for those people who want to grow and try to help them figure it out.
Brilliant. Well, I think we should give our panelists a big round of applause, and thank you for joining us.